This video is going to go over how to maneuver the basic user interface for Maya, as well as general modeling tips, and kind of how to get started with modeling your first few basic objects. So first, you're going to open up Autodesk Maya, and you'll see something similar to this. It might end up being kind of like this page with the Getting Started tab. But all we're really going to do here is click on New to create a new scene. Once in this new scene, you should see something like this. The first thing I recommend doing is going up to your workspace. It will most likely be set to general. For modeling, we're just going to set it to modeling standard. And then another thing that you should check is just to make sure that the outliner right here, this outliner tab, is open. And to do that, you're simply just going to click and toggle that button. But I recommend having this open because it's kind of like your modeling hierarchy. Next, I recommend turning on this poly count display. This will show you your vertices, faces, edges, and triangles while you're modeling your objects, which will help you when modeling so you can understand kind of how optimized your objects are currently at. So to do that, go to Display, Heads Up Display, and then Poly Count. See, that turned it off, so I'm just going to turn it back on. Now to actually begin creating a basic rock, which is what we're going to be starting with, a low poly rock, you can see that we're on the poly modeling tab right here. This is great. This is all we need for our modeling stuff. This is all you'll most likely kind of ever need for the most part for basic objects. So to create a sphere, or to create a rock, I'm going to insert a sphere and kind of edit its attributes. So simply just going to click on the sphere. This will create a sphere as shown. And you can see and click off of it to kind of interact with it. Now, similar to other game engines or other platforms, if you press F while having something selected, it will focus the camera to that. And to maneuver the camera around the scene, if you hold middle mouse click and Alt, you can pan. If you Alt left click while holding down, you can rotate around the scene. And if you mouse zoom in and out, you can zoom in and out. The next thing I want to go over is how to quickly move, rotate, or scale objects. You can see on the left here that there are buttons for the Move tool, Rotate tool, and Scale tool. But there's also some shortcuts that make it a lot easier. And those are W, E, and R. W gives you the shortcut for the Move tool, which you can use to move an object on any axis or just kind of free move it. E gives you the same thing but for rotating, so you can rotate it on a specific axis, or if you hold the middle, you can free rotate. And the same goes for the scale. Now the scale will scale it by both ends, so that's just something to keep in mind when using this scale tool. Q is also how you kind of go back to just the basic select kind of view without any tool selected. It's also this button up here. But to create a rock, first we're going to edit the subdivisions that this sphere actually has. To do that, I'm going to press T. This will open up the Polysphere tool. And with this, I can edit the axis and the height to edit the subdivisions. And you can see if I simply drag, you can see that kind of come into effect here. For now, I'm going to go with around 6 and 4 so that we get a nice middle line here that you can kind of see. I'm done with that. I'm just going to click off. So now you can kind of see how the object looks. See how we edited the sphere. And now we're going to get more specifically into how to edit, delete faces, and move around vertices. So right now we're in something called object mode. If you're familiar with Blender, this might be kind of a familiar topic to you. So we're going to go into face mode. And to do that, all you have to do is hold down right click. You'll get this menu. Make sure that you're always holding down right click until you want to select something. So I'm currently still holding down right click. I'm going to hover over face to go into face select mode and simply release it. You're going to see that the outline of the object turned to blue, and now I can select the specific faces. So what I want to do is, for this rock, I want to delete the bottom half of it, because in my game, that bottom half's going to be on the ground, and deleting those extra faces will save up on some space, even if it's just a little. So all I'm going to do is either, you have two options to kind of do this. You can individually select them, rotating around the scene by holding shift and clicking, or you could kind of rotate it to the specific angle, drag select, just like you would normally do on other platforms. Just click and drag and kind of select the bottom half. You can also use this tool in the top right to kind of give you a more specific locked on angle if you need it. But now that I have my bottom face selected, I'm simply just going to hit the delete key, and there you go. You can see that they are deleted. Now, this is pretty good, but I kind of want to bring this top down. So I'm going to go into vertice mode. So instead of choosing face, the same the right click menu, I'm going to choose vertex. This will show a vertex mode. And all these little purple dots are the different vertices. Okay? So I'm simply going to click the top one. Using my move tool, using the W shortcut, I'm going to bring this y-axis down so that it is a little bit more flat. You can see there that I have brought it down. Now it's flat. So this is now pretty good. That is kind of what I was looking for. But let's say I want to add a little bit more detail. There's a tool called Chamfer Vertex that will add a simple little effect that I think works really well for these rocks. So I'm going to select one of these edge rocks just to add like a little kind of cut here. So I'm going to select this. Now using shift and right click, this will open up a menu specific to kind of editing the vertices. So as you can see here, there is a chamfer vertex option. So all I'm going to do is do the same thing. Just hover over it and release. You can see with that, it kind of made a little cut. So if we go back to object mode, same right click menu, same thing, how you got to face and vertex. You go back to object mode, you can kind of see how there's a cut. Now to visualize this a little bit easier, I'm simply going to come up to these kind of shading things. It's kind of like how you view an object in the viewport. So let's discuss it a little bit. So first you have a wireframe. This will show you the wireframe of your object, which is really useful when you're trying to see kind of the polygon count that you might have, or visualize the vertices. Smooth shade is what we had before. It just kind of adds that kind of smoothness to it. Default material would kind of gray out any object if you had materials applied to it in Maya. Wireframe onshaded basically adds that wireframe view onto our shaded material. So you can see both kind of the hard edges and also the material at the same time, which is a view that I really like and one that I'm going to have enabled. So now that I have this enabled, you can kind of see where the edge kind of is cut out. Now let's say I wanted to put this into a game or an add material. The material wouldn't be perfect at the current state, because since we have edited this vertices specifically in kind of this model, the normals are a little messed up. So all we're going to do is really simple. We're going to select our object, go to Mesh Display, and there's 3 options right here for Harden Edge, Soften Edge, and Soften Hardened Edge. Soften Edge will basically smooth your object, which isn't really what we want for a hard surface rock. Soften Hardened Edge will basically kind of create some smoothness while also giving you kind of those hard edges still. So you can see now that this is kind of more prominent. And then Hardened Edge simply just strictly hardens each edge. So depending on the object you're making, that is kind of what you're going to want to do. Whenever you're typically done with an object, you should always make sure that the normals are set up well so that when you go to apply materials or texture, or just if you want general lighting to affect the object properly, that is something that you're probably going to want to look at. And it's really, really simple. So just those 3 options. So now we kind of have a basic rock. You know, I could go and chamfer some more vertices if I wanted using the same tool. So let's say I wanted to do that. Select this one, right click, chamfer. A good indicator to tell if your normals are kind of messed up is if you can see these kind of black like areas right here. That typically means that the normals are messed up. Just a little. So again, if I do the same thing, where I just choose harden, you can see that gets nice and cleaned up. Okay, so that's kind of that object done. So I'm going to move it over here. You can move it off to the side simply by doing W and moving it on the X. Or if you hold down the X key while moving, you can move it kind of incrementally, which is helpful in some certain situations. Now I'm going to create a pedestal. So this time I'm going to spawn a polygon cube. You can see here that we have the cube. So I am going to move this cube up kind of on the grid so that it is a little bit more flat on it. You can see that. And then I'm just going to start kind of basically shaping it into a pedestal. So I'm going to go into face mode because I think that this cube is a little bit too tall, and I want the base of the pedestal to be a little bit shorter in height. You can just go into object mode and scale it, but this kind of makes it uniformly, and since we had already moved it up, I don't really want to have to scale and then move it again. So instead, I'm going to go into face mode, simply grab this entire top face, and using my move tool, just bring it down. You can see that it brings it down to whatever level you want. Now I want this to kind of go in and up so that it has like a little pedestal, right? And to do that, we're going to use something called the extrude tool. If you're familiar with Blender or other modeling platforms, extrude is a tool that you're going to be using a lot and is really good for creating detail or kind of uniquely shaped objects. So I could technically create a bunch of different cubes to make up one pedestal, but I just want this one cube to be the entire model. You know, I don't want to have to deal with all that. So I'm going to select this face again. This time I'm going to go into scaling mode because I want it to kind of come in a bit before going up, right? And all I'm going to do is hold shift. While holding shift and any of the movement tools, you can see that there is an extrude tag applied to it when I'm holding shift. So I'm not holding shift now. You can see that it's kind of normal and it moves as such. And then when I'm shifting, you can see it gives the extrude kind of tag. So I'm going to go back to my scaling, aim for the middle so that it kind of is uniformly scaled, and extrude it, click it, and drag it in. Now you can see that it kind of, what it did was bring in kind of another face. So with this tool, I just want it to kind of come in the pedestal a little bit. And then I also would want it to come up. But instead of just simply dragging it up, because you can see that messes up with my base now, it brings these other faces up. I'm going to extrude it up. You can see how that keeps it nice and neat. Now I want it to come back out for the top of the pedestal. So I'm going to extrude, similar to how we did in, I'm going to do out. And then with this, I'm just going to extrude up. And then you can kind of see we have a mini pedestal. Now, if this is what you want, that's great. But I kind of want these edges to be a little bit rounder. I want my top base of the pedestal to be kind of round. So I'm going to go into edge mode and select these surrounding edges by doing shift and clicking on each of them. Now we are going to use a beveling tool. It's called the bevel tool. And what this bevel tool will basically do is take any face or edge that you have selected and kind of give it some segments. So let's visualize this. If I do Control B while having these edges selected, it will bevel it. And it brings up a little menu right here, which we can talk about. So you can see just off the base start, it kind of has already rounded off those edges a little bit. This fraction value will move kind of where, or will determine how much of the fraction of the edge is kind of beveled. So you can see that. So if I want it to be like kind of slightly rounded, I would bring it out a little bit, you know? But if I want it to be more circular, I'd bring it up. That's kind of the main difference there. The next thing that you'd probably be doing is doing the segments. Segments basically allow you to add more segments. So you can see here that there's one face and it's flat. If I add another one, now there's two faces and it makes it a little bit more round. The more segments you do, the more round it's going to be. And the more detail that you're probably going to have. But for most objects, you don't really need to do segments. And let me tell you why. One, because I already kind of have the effect that I'm going for here, so there's no point in really segmenting it more. And two, we need to keep in mind that this asset is going to potentially be used in a game. And the more we segment, if you look at the top left, let's look at the faces, CS52. The more segments we add, the higher that face count gets, and the more unoptimized the object is. And when you're doing this a lot with objects, it adds up over time and can lead to bad performance issues. So you really should keep that in mind when beveling. It is a really powerful tool, but it does add detail, which also will take a little hit on performance. But if it's nothing too big, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a really good tool for adding detail. Extrude and bevel are two tools that you're going to be using kind of whenever you're generally modeling. And it's best to kind of mess around with them, see how they can interact. So yeah. So one thing that's also cool that you can do with extrude, which I'll mention very quickly, is so similar to how we did for the base, I'll extrude in, but instead of extruding up this time, I'm going to extrude down. And you can kind of see that this creates a little inset. So you can also do that, which is a really useful tool and can be used in certain situations. Okay. Now let's talk about kind of generally getting it ready to be exported, an object. You can kind of see here that the pivot of the object is a little bit messed up. It's not quite towards the center. And to change that, we're simply going to select this button right here, which is center pivot. You can see the pivot after clicking that, get centered, which is just what we want. If you want to move the pivot around manually, you can press D. This will kind of bring up this menu, which will allow you to move the pivot of the object however you want. But for now, I just want to keep it at the center. These two buttons up here are also things that you should be using before exporting an object to a game engine. This delete by history is useful if you have combined objects or made any modifiers on them. This will basically ensure that the object's current state is saved as its own independent object, and the modifiers aren't currently affecting that anymore. And then this freeze transformations means that if you have two combined objects, so let's say I want 2 cubes. I'm going to bring this one up, scale it in, duplicate it using Control D. Let's say I want to combine these 2 cubes. Over here in our modeling toolkit, we have mesh tools, as you can see here. So I'm simply going to click combine. This will combine these 2 cubes into one singular object. But you can see here in our hierarchy that there's still the data of the past 2 cubes. This is where our delete history tool comes in handy. If I were to export it as it is, then these transformations and the history of these 2 objects existing separately will be saved. So just deleting history will remove that. And then in this case, where we are combining 2 objects that used to have different pivots, so they had 2 pivots that were each centered to one of them. This freeze transformations button makes it so that those old pivots that were on the singular objects are wiped, and it's just now this singular central pivot. I know that's kind of a lot, but basically what this means is that if you were to export this new combined mesh into a game engine, instead of having this singular object and then 2 different objects in between. So let me structure this out for you. Let me use a little pen tool here. So when we have one pivot, right, this is like a unity hierarchy. So this is our singular object. This is how, it's only one object. This is what we want when we're inserting it into an engine. We only want this one object to be in the hierarchy. If we didn't remove the other pivots, the other transforms from the previous 2 cubes, this one object would have 2 more pivots inside of it. Now sometimes this is handy if you need to edit the pivot of a specific object that has been combined. Say I wanted to edit this cube specifically like outwards sometimes, or animate it. But in most cases, this just leads to some more complexity, and you really don't want that. So that's kind of something that you should keep in mind. Okay. Cool. Let's get rid of that. So that's basically what that does. Now let's say I wanted to create a hole in this. So I kind of showed you earlier how you could do that with extruding in. Let's say I wanted a circular hole. To easily do that, I'm going to create a cylinder. And with the cylinder, I'm just going to remove the cap here. You can see that these caps kind of add a lot of faces. So I'm just going to remove the cap to keep it optimized. I'm going to scale it in. And I want to say, like, I want this cylinder to cut out like this kind of circular cylinder shape into the podium. To do this, we're going to be using a Boolean, which will basically subtract this shape from this. So to do that, I'm going to select my podium first, what I want to remain, and the cylinder, what I want to kind of subtract from the podium. Then I'm going to head over to Mesh, Booleans, and Difference from A to B. You can see that it has now cut that circular shape into the podium. But now you can also see that there's like this weird red outline. This is where deleting history comes into play. So right now I have a difference modifier, this Boolean, on both these objects that is affecting both these objects. That means that even though I have cut and removed the cylinder, it is still, the data of it is still there. So to basically make sure that this cut has been saved, we're simply just going to hit the delete history button. And you can see it gets rid of that Boolean modifier. It gets rid of that red kind of cylinder. And now we have our kind of object with it cut out. And then simply what I would do here is, again, center the pivot, needed to, and freeze transformations. Okay. Now that this is done, let's say I want to export this object. So I'm going to go to File. With the object selected, I'm going to go to File, Export Selection, choose the file type as FBX export. This is the file type that you're typically going to want to be using when exporting models. It basically makes sure that the materials that you might have applied later on are saved with the model data. I'm going to deselect this, go down to Geometry, and just make sure I have Smoothing Group selected too. Okay, that just helps kind of compress the object a little bit and optimize it. And then all you would do is kind of title it whatever you want, export it, and then it's in whatever folder you want it to be. And then you can go and use it in kind of whatever you want. That's kind of the basics of Maya, kind of how to create basic shapes, how to use the basic tools that you might use when creating other objects. All of these tools are things that I personally use, and when you get kind of more proficient with them, you can start creating really cool and detailed objects in shorter amounts of time as you get kind of used to the controls and various modeling methods with Maya. So next steps I recommend are kind of just creating more objects. Find reference images of what you might want to make, and then try to figure out kind of how to create a model for that. I'll link in the description a playlist for low poly models. It's a playlist that I personally looked at when I was learning modeling, and I think it's really helpful for anyone that's kind of getting into it. He does a really good job of kind of explaining everything that he's doing, and also shows you how to kind of create various low poly objects for your games. So that is it. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Otherwise, happy learning.